Welcome to session number 9 for the 19th Northwest Interlibrary Loan and Resource Sharing Conference. The title of this session is ILL Operations in the Time of COVID-19 on Staying Open During a Pandemic. My name is Manisha Khetarpal, and I'm the convener for this session. Since I work for a tribal college, First Nations College, located on a reservation in Alberta, Canada, only 45 minutes away from Edmonton, I'll introduce myself in Cree. Manisha Netsigasun Notavi Balwant Nikavi Bemla, Netatoskan Masnaikan Kamik, Maskuchis Cultural College, Mistahi Ninanaskamon Pematisovin Emikosian. So I introduce myself with the place because territory is important and kinship. Notavi Nigavi, the name of my parents. Thank you so much for coming to session number 9. This session is being recorded with permission from the presenters. They retain the copyright to the information they are presenting and may request its removal for public viewing in the future by written request to NWIL committee chairperson. If you have any questions during the session to all the attendees, please use the Q&A function, and I will pose these to the presenter at the end of their presentation. All attendees should be muted. The door prize keyword will be revealed between the presentation and the question answer session. And the link for the form is in Sched and will be placed in the chat. On that note, I turn the session over to our presenters, Miss Natalie and Mr. Jermaine from Georgia Southern University.
Thank you, Manisha, and thank you everybody who's here today in this session. We're on day 3 of Northwest Interlibrary Loan Conference, and I'm very excited to be here. My name is Natalie Logue. I am the Interlibrary Loan Librarian at Georgia Southern University, and I am joined today by Jermaine Bryant, who is the Interlibrary Loan Lending Specialist at Georgia Southern University. So I know over the past year that COVID has drastically impacted everybody around the globe, and the impact on libraries has ranged from budget impact and mainly budget reduction, as well as new and innovative processes. Today's presentation, however, is going to focus just on the Zach S. Henderson's response to COVID and how we found opportunities to excel within the challenges presented to us. So for Georgia Southern University, the COVID-19 response really began on Friday, March 13th, 2020. And you can see here there was a lot going on in the world during that time. We got the word from the university on this date that the campus would close for the next 2 weeks at the least, and that faculty should begin preparing for online teaching. And so our initial response was for me and the Access Services librarian to meet and talk about some of the logistics of leaving the campus, working from home, but also to decide if not coming into the library at all was something that we really could do. And the way we made this decision was we went out and we talked to our staff and our team members. And for me, that was the 3 staff members that work under me in Interlibrary Loan. And we talked about what services we had, what we were in the middle of doing, and what we felt that we could support for students, and what comfort level we had with being in the library and in person. And based on that, we came up with our initial response, which was about a 50% work from home and 50% in office schedule for all faculty and staff in the Access Services and Interlibrary Loan. And I'm not going to go into the schedule at this time, but basically we went through a couple of different iterations before we landed on the schedule that we would hold for the remainder of the spring semester and through the fall semester. So in order to determine what kind of services we could provide and what our response needed to be during COVID-19, we had to look at what were our major areas of concern and what did we think our patrons were going to need the most. And the 2 big ones here were excellent service, which is always at the forefront of our minds, and communication. So we knew, for example, that A lot of our due dates, we did not have the ability to mass change over, and students would still be getting those notifications of things coming due, things being overdue, and that would cause a lot of stress in a time when they were already facing uncertainty in their classes and uncertainty with regards to healthcare around the world. And so we wanted to put notifications in anything that was going out from ILL, that we were happy to work with students, that we could renew, that we could extend, that there were going to be no penalties for that in order to alleviate those fears. We also had patron concerns about how they would get materials that they needed for projects that could not be put on hold, such as dissertations, end of year projects, and for our faculty publications that they were working on that did have deadlines. And so we wanted to keep our operations open as much as possible in order to get our faculty, our students, and our staff those materials that they required to be successful. And this was really important for faculty moving online who suddenly needed support for digitized chapters, access to open educational resources, things like that. And of course, you know, these are all based in services that we do regularly, but they were changing the way they looked very drastically. So we had to update our ILL workflows based on who was in the office, what we could support, where our faculty and students were located. And then this led to, of course, updates in our system settings. How long could our materials be lended for, extending due dates, creating very generous return deadlines and renewal contracts. And all of this, you know, I've spoken really heavily about within our community, but it does also reflect out to the larger resource sharing community. So we continue to have these kind of conversations with universities around the country, as well as our consortia in the Southeast and in Georgia.
Concerns from the staff perspective began with confusion of what was going to happen. We started out getting university emails every 15 minutes with information and directions that contradicted the previous email. My direct supervisor, Miss Natalie, and access service supervisor did a great job weeding through the information and coming up with a plan and schedule that allowed us to continue functioning after asking if we wanted to continue to come into the office to work. As the pandemic affected more states, our concern turned to having time to fulfill our obligations in a timely manner while maintaining the high quality of work that was needed. The first thing that we had to do with lending was adjust our response time. We changed our loan response time from 2 days to 4 days because of our alternating shift schedule. We also extended the loan period for physical items lent out. Every item that became due during the shutdown was renewed regardless of when it was sent out. As more states shut down, the demand for physical loans decreased, but the demand for scans from physical journals increased significantly. We started with a couple of staff members pulling journals and microfilm to be scanned and 2 staff members scanning. This proved to be a short-term solution as the number of requests for scans from physical books continued to increase. We then had to adjust our workflow as the restrictions from the shutdown caused us to split the department into 2 shifts working alternate days. We trained additional staff to assist with scanning articles using our scanners and microfilm readers to keep up with the request demands. Although we had an increase of ebooks being bought by the purchasing department, we shipped physical books to faculty and students as the institution went to fully online instruction. This caused a slight increase in books being shipped out. One issue that became apparent is undeliverable packages. Whether a library issued a request and before delivery closed their doors, or a faculty or student moved without updating their correct address, we had some items returned to us. When it came to UPS, we automatically had a tracking number to locate packages. We could track packages and determine if it made it to its intended destination and was undeliverable because of a shutdown or if the address was incorrect. But most of our returns came from USPS. We also had several individuals that claimed they never received packages or inquired where their packages from USPS was. After we contacted USPS, we were told that we could add tracking labels to our library materials shipment without an increase the cost. This helped us track packages within the USPS system and inform patrons of the progression of books being shipped to them. This also helped with recovery of items shipped to an address that a patron no longer resided at. With every book that was shipped to a faculty, staff, or student, we included a USPS return label that could be used to return the books. We also supplied return labels by email, creating a PDF of the label so that if anyone had a book that needed to be returned that wasn't originally shipped to them, they would be able to.
So our lending services did take on a lot of additional responsibility during this time, just under their normal operations. As Jermaine said, the request for scanning and the request for information from our physical collection really did a major uptick during this time. However, we also expanded those ILL lending services beyond what we normally support. So one sort of minor but definitely impactful service we did was ship-to-home service. So we already provide ship-to-home service for distance learners at Georgia Southern University. If they're registered for 100% online and they reside more than 50 miles outside of or away from the library, we'll ship any materials they need to their home address. We ended up doing this for any patrons during this time, whether they resided next door to the library or 100 miles away. We really wanted to support our patrons in being able to have access to the library materials without breaking their quarantine or stay-at-home guidelines. And this also is not a service that was limited to interlibrary loan requests or DocDel requests that came through interlibrary loan. We also made it possible to request items through ALMA, which is our integrated library system, for items out of our catalog to be shipped to patrons' home address. And for that, we had to find a way to streamline the creation of those shipping labels and packaging and sort of work it into our normal interlibrary loan workflow. And what we ended up doing, because lending was picking up so much work during this time, was we had our interlibrary loan borrower collect those books and the printed requests out of ALMA and generate the shipping labels for them, or tag them to have a UPS shipping label made if that was necessary. Now, two of the bigger projects that lending took on during this time was shipping microscopes and lab kits for the College of Science and Mathematics and shipping laptops to students. So for our laptops, our library has a high number of laptops, I'm not going to guess at the number right now, that we let students check out for a week at a time. At the beginning of COVID-19, several of these students already had laptops. We were down by about 50%, and we just extended those due dates initially for the 2-week closure period, and then eventually until the end of the semester. And if they were registered for summer, we extended again until August 15th, which was the start of the fall semester. So we were really generous about those laptops. But we continuing to get requests for laptops from our students, and we understood that these students were being thrown into 100% online courses, and they may not have the technology necessary to support that coursework. Our university does not require undergraduate students to have a laptop, and our library has a high number of desktops. There are computer labs around the campus. And so these are students that would have normally used resources on campus and now did not have those available to them. So the way we resolved this was we worked with our ITS on campus, and we got an additional 200 laptops donated, or loaned, I should say, from other colleges around the campus. These were formatted by the ITS to be able to be lent out effectively. They were cataloged by our Collections and Resource Services Department, and then they were checked out and mailed by the Access Services and Interlibrary Loan departments. And that was a very successful program. We were able to get our students the technology that they needed and provide them with the support without having them leave their homes or break their social distancing. Now, the College of Science and Mathematics program was an interesting one. This happened at the very beginning of summer 2020, and at this time, the library had already been doing these ship-to-home laptops and ship-to-home books, and it was well known around campus. And so the College of Science and Mathematics approached us and said, would it be possible to have you ship out 75 lab kits to our students so they can complete the lab portion of their coursework at home? So we met with them several times. We talked about the logistics, the cost, what we could and could not do, and what was expected of the packaging. And as you can see here, on the day we actually shipped out these packages, it was about a 5-person operation. So this is myself and the teacher from the College of Science and Mathematics actually packaging those shipments to go out. There's a microscope that attaches to a smartphone, a set of slides, dropper, and some samples that we would package into a padded envelope. The microscope was cataloged and checked out to each student. So as it was packaged, it was labeled with which student had that checked out to them. Jermaine Bryant made the UPS or USPS shipping labels in order to get those to the students. And another Access Services worker actually took those printed labels and affixed them to the correct packages. And it took us about a couple of hours to get all of the packages ready and sent out, but it was a really successful program. And so all of this shipping out, all of this shipping to home, of course, required shipping back services, which was a whole other beast. And I'll let Jermaine get into some more of the impacts on ILL in the next slide.
The impact on interlibrary loan was almost instant. Since we were used to sending books to distance learners, our document delivery wasn't impacted as much as other areas. We did modify procedures to enable us to track deliveries for document delivery, so we would be able to update patrons on the progress of their books. Other than document delivery, our lending loans dropped significantly, which helped mitigate the impact of the increase of document delivery. One of the biggest impacts to interlibrary loan was scanning articles. Although we are equipped to perform this as a normal function of interlibrary loan lending, we had a shift in the type of requests that we began to receive. We went from filling most of our article requests from digital holdings to having 100% of our requests come in from articles from physical holdings. Another big impact to interlibrary loan was the shipping of laptops and microscopes. This was a great opportunity to showcase the ability of interlibrary loan as a support unit to the university. We were able to show that we are equipped to ship and safeguard any item to the university community as the need arose. Interlibrary loan was also instrumental in the return of items from the university community to their proper location. One long-lasting impact to interlibrary loan was the returning of high dollar value items like the laptops, which would require students to collect and retain forms from UPS due to the insurance amount that was necessary for shipping a laptop. This generated an undue burden on our student body. Miss Natalie contacted UPS and was able to negotiate a deal that allowed us to pay a flat rate annually to ensure every package we shipped regardless of declared value. This eliminated the burden on our university community when returning items through UPS. The returning of laptops was when I tapped out and said, no mas. We were responsible for returning laptops for 3 locations, and there was just too many lists and emails to keep up with. We ended up having a staff member act as a filter and receive all correspondence pertaining to the returning of laptops and create one list that I could work from to ensure every request was completed in a timely and efficient way.
So we've talked a lot about how interlibrary loan lending was impacted during this time, but I don't want to forget our interlibrary loan borrowing office. So of course, as COVID spread across the country and we saw states closing, the number of requests we could fill for borrowing dropped drastically. However, we did continue to try and borrow physical items if possible and if necessary for our students. And I think during this time, the rapport that our department has with the students and faculty on campus really played in our favor. Many of the times we were able to have conversations with those patrons over email about what was and was not possible. We worked with libraries around the country to get table of contents scanned, to have personnel at those libraries physically look at older materials for us and let us know page numbers, what correct volume we were trying to ask for. And it was a really great way to showcase to our patrons just how far our borrowing services and our interlibrary loan services are willing to go to find them the resources they need. And during this time, communicating both with our patrons became really important. We needed to make sure they remembered that they had physical items from us that they had checked out in January or February that were going to come due to another library, but we didn't want them to feel attacked or chased down during a time when our faculty may have left their books in their office and were not able to get to them, or students were not on campus. And so we used the automated notification systems to include different kinds of disclaimers, letting them know that these messages were for their benefit, just to keep them on track, make sure that they knew what they had, and to contact us with further concerns. Definitely the tracking that Jermaine talked about before, putting those USPS tracking numbers on there, really significantly helped as we were able to fill some physical loan requests and get those sent out to patrons. This kind of pressure that our borrowing department was under really identified some of the weaknesses in our own workflow, and we tried to work in Iliad customization manager in order to correct those. Some things like where our automated processes went, what kind of queues we used, and because we were seeing some fewer requests, we were able to take some time to focus on that during the summer. So as I mentioned, the communication with our patrons is important. Communication among libraries for borrowing was also very important. And at the very beginning of the pandemic, I began seeing emails and messages from listservs, things coming in through the ILLers Facebook group, all trying to gather the same kind of information, which was basically, what are you doing? What is the rest of the world doing right now? So on March 16th, which is just a few days after the COVID response started on Georgia Southern developed this tracking spreadsheet. And it was initially going to be just for Henderson and Lane libraries in order to sort of get all the information in one central place. But because I saw so many requests for the same types of information, I decided to go ahead and share this out over those listservs and emails and let everybody contribute. And by March 19th, we had more than 200 responses. By the end of March, there were more than 350. And this was a really unique and kind of insane experience. I originally planned to sort of curate the information as it came in, have people comment, edit it, just to make sure that the information was being put in a consistent way and we weren't getting a lot of different variations of the same kinds of data. However, it very quickly became apparent that I could not maintain that level of control over this document. There was just too many changes happening and too many institutions that wanted to contribute. contribute. And so I ended up letting anybody with access or anybody who had the link to the document have editing access to it. And it really exploded from there. It was shared out on listservs. I assume it was shared between libraries to other listservs as it grew and spread out, because we did have a response from around the United States. And I think what this really speaks to is a need from the community to have a central way of communicating this kind of important information, that this is how sometimes we want to make decisions about interlibrary loan, is how our peer institutions around the world are operating, because we are relying on each other in order to be successful in interlibrary loan. What our neighbors are doing in the state, across the country, really impacts our decisions here. And as this document grew, it grew with the community. So I got suggestions for additional columns to be added in there. I got suggestions for different results from the drop down to be added in there, and I complied as much as I could keep up with it. However, this document was really insufficient to supply the kind of consistent information we needed in the community, and OCLC stepped up and initially created their loan lending time coding in order to communicate that core information, which OCLC touched on in the vendors presentations earlier this week. If you were not familiar with that, 20 days meant you could not send physical items and could not scan physical items. 16 days meant you couldn't send any physical items, but you could scan, and any less than that meant that your loan and scanning operations were in full working order. And the thing about this too is that I don't think that there was ever 100% participation rate. I definitely saw it pick up the longer that this sort of existed in the community. But I think it definitely speaks to that difficulty of communicating this kind of important information to all departments and all institutions equally. Eventually, OCLC also provided a website that is a map. It shows a little bit more detailed information, is a little bit more manageable or definitely more manageable than this document in order to see that information. And I'm going to pop that over into chat real quick for y'all.
As the university prepared to open its doors for the fall semester, we decided that July 31st would be the last day that we would ship anything to local patrons. We informed students that we could accommodate special needs, and we could also meet patrons at the door that had concerns about entering the library to return items or pick up items they requested. By the library staying open and having the ability to meet the needs of the university community, we established strong relationships with patrons and corresponded with several new users. We increased the awareness of interlibrary loans, not only as a resource to fill traditional requests, but also any new services that may be required of us if the need should arise.
So what was the cost of all of these new services and persistent services during the pandemic? From a fiscal standpoint, it was very expensive. We probably spent close to $6,000 keeping the shipping services open. We don't really know the cost of anything that was shipped through the United States Postal Service because of the way that bill comes in. I don't ever have to see it, but just from the information I was able to gather, it was not cheap in order to support these. We did get a little bit of support from the CARES funding for laptop shipping and laptop shipping supplies, which was very helpful. But overall, our department really had to pull on its own resources and its own established funding in order to make this possible for our students. Now, the fiscal cost of shipping is not the only thing to consider when you look at these kind of services and increased services. Our ILL team had to train themselves in additional services such as the packaging of the laptops, the returning of those laptops. As Jermaine mentioned, we had to explore how to reduce the burden on our students when trying to get them to ship back through UPS. And then we had to train additional members around the library for other tasks, and that definitely took time and effort on the interlibrary loan team's part. I think when you look at it, it's time, it's effort, and it's also mental energy. As Jermaine mentioned before, there was a lot on the interlibrary loan lending plate and a lot to think about on a day-to-day basis. So it really took a lot out of the department to make this possible. However, we got so many benefits out of keeping the interlibrary loan services open and expanding this. We definitely became a very visible part of the libraries for our community, as demonstrated by the College of Science and Mathematics reaching out to us for their needs and services. I hope that we also became a more visible part of the interlibrary loan community, and that GPM will be recognized as a place where you can go if you can't find it anywhere else, that we will really go above and beyond if possible to get that resource to you. During this time, which I think I did these stats from about March 16th to August 1st, we had 25% more requests filled in lending than the exact same times in 2019. And borrowing saw almost the same in a decrease. We had fewer requests filled. That's not necessarily to say fewer requests submitted, but we're a little less successful in borrowing. However, even though we had some loss of success in the borrowing, we also were able to demonstrate our value to the community and to the library by persistently trying to find those resources for patrons or negotiate with them on additional services or resources that they might need. So if we couldn't get a book, was there a chapter we could get? Could we purchase an ebook on their behalf? Things like that. We became a big intermediary between our patrons' needs and what the library could provide, and hopefully came out with a really positive view of the library loan services and of the library as a whole. Of course, we do have improved relationships with the College of Science and Mathematics for being able to step up and help them out with their need with their patrons this summer. And hopefully that translates into their faculty being more aware of our services, being more ready to request materials, and hopefully talking with other faculty members that they're aware that ILL services are here and are ready to help them. And sort of like a weird side effect that we didn't plan for, but that's very beneficial, is now we have additional staff trained throughout the library to support and back up interlibrary loan in a couple of different functions. So if we do suffer another crisis, if we have a large number of ILL staff out or a big surge in requests, we do have some additional personnel that we can draw on now to help us. And so that's all. I encourage you to reach out to myself or Jermaine, Bryant if you have any questions or you want any more information. We have a little less than 15 minutes left in this presentation to answer some of your questions, and I will hand it over to Manisha.
Awesome. That was an awesome presentation. You showed us how ILL can contribute to the organization as a shipping site for laptops and other lab supplies. So there are many questions posted in chat, and these questions are dealing with the cost for shipping, and I'll go through them one by one. The first question is, hello, thank you for your presentation. Do you have an idea of the cost of shipping for mailing out ILL, EAD, borrowed items to patrons' homes? Did you have a budget?
We do not have a budget for that kind of shipping, and I don't really have an estimate of how much that costs, because most of our patrons, even if they move back in with their parents, still reside in the state of Georgia. We only use USPS for that, which I don't get the bill for. It goes directly to admin as a bill for the whole library. I will say that because we do ship everything through library rate mail, a single package costs about $2 to ship. And we probably shipped, I don't know, a little over 100, at least 100, so $200 or a little more than that.
Okay. So the next question is, Anna would like to know, why did surrounding colleges loan the laptops to you? Didn't they need them?
Oh, so it wasn't outside, it wasn't non-Georgia Southern University. It was like colleges within our university. And the answer to that is because all of our patrons were off campus, there was basically nobody in those colleges that needed laptops. So there was nobody on campus, there were no faculty on campus, there were no classes happening on campus. And so while normally they do need those laptops, because we got the word that the university campus would remain closed, they didn't need them during this time. And the need was for their students to have access to those.
Excellent. Thank you. Why another next question? How did you maintain social distancing in the library? Did you look at the HVAC system in your library? Did all staff work 50% of the time in the library? What about those with health issues or family issues?
So all staff in the library had the option to request to work 100% from home, and we did have I believe it was two staff members from Access Services and Interlibrary Loan combined that chose to work 100% from home during the height of COVID-19. The rest of the staff members did choose to work 50% in the office and 50% at home. And we did make it the staff members' choice. So anybody during that time could have requested to work 100% from home, and we would have supported them in that decision and adjusted what our services could be based on that. But we are very fortunate here to work with a really tight crew in Access Services that's also very patron focused, and I think that they felt that it was important to be here in order to feel the impact of their work. And in terms of social distancing, so we really struggled at the beginning to figure this out, because initially it was you would work 50% of the day in the library and 50% of the day at home. So you might do a morning shift or an evening shift, which mimicked the way our shifts work already. However, this was not working. It was very confusing. It was not really effective. And so we ended up having two shifts, shift A and shift B, which were much, much smaller. And it meant that you could be at your desk and have a desk or two between you and anybody else. And those shifts would work alternatively Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Tuesday, Thursday. And then the next week they would switch so that no one shift was working more days in the library than any other. We also encouraged our staff we did eventually open up to patrons. I don't really want to get into it. It's a really big question and didn't really involve interlibrary loan. But we continue to emphasize to our staff that their safety is paramount, and we had to adjust our service model. So no longer going out and helping patrons in the stacks, but instead trying to give them verbal guidance in where to go. Where we are now, Jermaine is actually on a different floor than us, so that our office in ILL, which is a little bit smaller space, we are able to continue social distancing. And we really only see each other face to face maybe once a day, and our whole department really emphasized the wearing of masks.
Awesome. Next question is by Paul Adasisak. I remain unclear. With laptops and microscopes, how did students arrange for the return shipping?
You want to take this one, Jermaine?
Sure. With the laptops and microscopes, we would have automated messages go out to the students through Alma, saying that the laptop or the microscope is due soon. Everything that went out had a barcode, and we actually charged it to the student's library account. So that way we could keep track of who had what. And so the system automatically said, okay, this is about to be due. And that prompted the student to then send us an email saying that they needed a return label so that we could facilitate them with returning that item to us.
Thank you. Thank you, Jermaine. Michelle Reed from Bates Tech College would like to know, what volume of high value item return shipping do you have was needed for deal with USPS on flat rate returns?
Can you repeat that?
What volume of high value item return shipping do you have?
So Our volume of high value return shipping item is so far just really the laptops, which I'm not sure exactly how many came back through return shipping, because patrons could drop it off physically in the library even if we shipped it to them initially, which some people did because they were returning to Statesboro for the fall semester. But I'd say we probably got between 50 and 100 laptops back through the mail exclusively.
Many people are congratulating you for setting up the communication sheet earlier, before the OCLC could do it. And the question is the doc with info still active, available?
The document is still up and going. I have thought about yanking it off of line because I think it's all definitely out of date now, but it does still exist. I don't have the link on hand, but I can put it in this session's notes afterwards.
Did you request renewals during COVID-19 on your patron behalf on items you had borrowed from another library to allow an email to be sent to the patron that their ILL was renewed?
Yes. So we do prefer that our patrons submit their own renewal request. It makes our process easier. But again, we have the luxury of having enough time and enough staff that if a patron emails or calls and asks for a renewal on their items, we will process that renewal for them by going into WorldShare and submitting the request that way. And when we do that, we do tend to manually ask for a longer renewal. When we get those renewal approvals in Iliad, we have a pre-programmed notification that we can click on, that will go out to the patron and saying it has been successfully renewed and this is your new due date, or we have one that says this was not renewed and you will need to return this item as early as possible.
How was USPS delivery time?
So originally USPS delivery time is actually pretty good. We've been using USPS for years and years now, and typically it would get to the patron within a week. Now, I am sure everybody is aware that USPS is having a lot of problems lately with some changes in their administration and their finances. So I would say since like August, we have been getting reports that USPS packages are taking up to 2 weeks to arrive. It has been really, really helpful that we have those tracking numbers on them now. So if somebody contacts us, we can let them know, we know exactly where this is. You're not responsible for it until it has been delivered. But that delivery time has definitely been getting longer recently.
Kathy Boswell would like to know, have you had challenges managing your patrons' expectations?
Definitely, I think so. We have some very proactive faculty members here who will put in a request and then say, well, I know this library has this. I know UGA could provide this book for me, and we're very happy that they're interested and they know how to use WorldCat and they know how to look up this kind of information. However, during the pandemic, it did become kind of a problem because they would say, I know UGA has this book, and I'd have to say, I hate to break it to you, but there's physically nobody on that campus right now. They cannot give us this book. However, we do try to have a really strong rapport with faculty. We talk to them a lot, even if they're not having a problem. We try to have those conversations with them and let them know we want to support them, make sure everything's okay. And during this time, we used those same channels to meet their expectations and mitigate what we could actually resolve. So explaining to them how the pandemic was affecting libraries, explaining to them that while we were in the office, not all libraries were, what were the limits. And we really gave them as much information as we had. So I would tell them, I know that 7 libraries in Germany have this thing for you, and normally I could borrow it, but international borrowing and lending has really trickled to zero at this time because of COVID-19. We just can't get through those international borders, and they would usually understand that.
So just an announcement for all the attendees, the door prize link is posted in chat along with the code word. So go ahead and type it, and I'll continue with a couple of other questions. Did your existing workflow systems already consist of return labels?
Yes, we already consisted of those return labels. They are merchandise return labels. And we just always include them anytime we mail a book out to a patron. To create those kind of labels, you can contact your postal service, and you have to get yourself set up as a merchant, because we have a 4-digit code, so that when that label is used for something, we get billed instead of the patron.
How are you physically handling returns? Are you counting mail time as quarantine time?
So I personally do count mailing time as quarantine time. I'm not as concerned about items that come back in through the mail. However, because of the way our processes are, and because it's easier to not break up the return process, if we get something returned in the mail, it goes through either a 3-day quarantine in the library, or if it is not a book, if it's like a DVD or something, it goes through a wipe down decontamination period.
Okay, so Haneen Abuida from Zayed University, Dubai would like to know, for health and safety, what is your procedure when you shipped the items to your clients? Are they sanitized? And the same when returns, you mentioned that.
Yeah, so definitely shipping out is a concern, because we don't want to share any of the virus that's in the library with our patrons, as we are trying to honor their stay-at-home procedures. We do have latex gloves in the library, which thanks to our I forget who gave us those gloves first, but another department on campus was able to provide us with gloves and masks at the very beginning of the pandemic. And now, of course, we do have masks for all of our faculty and staff working in the library, and we continue to have latex gloves. And we try to be as careful as we can with packaging and securing those materials to send out to our patrons. I'm going to skip on to Heidi's, because I see it too. We do not use UV sanitizers. I'm still waiting on the research for UV sanitizers' effect on COVID-19.
When you ship to your patron, do you put a specific label or write book on the package to get a library rate?
So we use labels that say library rate on them. It's a little bit hard to explain. They're pre-designed, but the very top section of it does declare it basically to be library rate. And our postal service puts a secondary label on there declaring it as library rate.
Awesome. Rosemary Mendoza would like to know, do you let other libraries mail your books to their patrons?
Absolutely. If we lend out a book to a library, they are more than welcome to mail that out to their patrons. We do not have libraries mail their books directly to our patrons, simply because we do want it to go through that check-in process, that it is received, this is the condition it was received, and know that we have successfully sent it to that student.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So to all the attendees, we had more than 300 people live in this session. Thank you. And to our presenters, Natalie and Jermaine, I'd say thank you in Cree, where I work, in the Mascoutches Plains Cree Y dialect indigenous language. Mistahi Ninanaskamon Pematisawant Emikosian. We are really grateful that you shared so much information, and we thank the creator for creating you. Thank you so much. Now it's break time for you, and then over to the next session, which will be a panel presentation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. To all the attendees, you're welcome to communicate with our presenters and send your questions directly to them.